Welcome to another episode of Mission Apollo. Today we have our COO Nadim and myself, and we have an interesting topic. We've been hearing a lot recently about the economy. Obviously, things are getting more expensive. It's been a couple of years of pretty consistent inflation, although recently there's been some progress made in that direction. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're not here to discuss economics. We're here to talk about how scooters fit into that picture, and in particular, how you can save money by ditching your car and hopping on a scooter instead. So, Nadim, before we get started, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. It's been a while since we've done one of these together, just the two of us. So let's see how
Sure.
this one goes.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe an interesting place to start in this discussion, would be to ask you to give us a general sense of what are you seeing. Like you travel a lot. You were just in New York. You're in Montreal. You're gonna
Mhm.
head to Toronto. On your travels, any anecdotal stories or information you can share about the general landscape of scooters? Are you seeing more of them? If so, what kind?
Yeah.
And what they're replacing? Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start with Montreal. It's actually interesting. I think this summer in Montreal was the first summer that I actually started to notice electric scooters like just around, you'd always kind of see the one or
Yeah.
two, and they're just like you see them so infrequently that you don't really remember that you saw an electric scooter.
Mhm.
But now I don't step out without seeing electric scooter, and I'm always looking
Okay.
to try to identify if it's an
Uh-huh.
Apollo or not. And surprisingly, interestingly enough, it's good, I guess, that I'm seeing
Yeah.
a lot more Apollos. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. 'Cause
I
there's that
always try to take
advantage too, right?
I always take my phone out and try to snap a picture if someone is riding, like a city or something. And then I guess outside of Montreal, well, I think bikes obviously a huge thing, just anywhere more generally. But
Mhm.
Montreal's been doing a really good job with bike lanes and expanding that.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's
that's
a trend
great
that
for
we're
scooters as well.
we're seeing in a few cities, right? This kind of realization that if you build the infrastructure, the riders will follow, right? So
Yeah,
I'm curious if you noticed the same trend in New York during your last trip there.
yeah. Interestingly, like New York, I think New York has always been on the forefront with stuff like this. Like they've always had. I mean, people are kind of wild over there. People taking the bridge with the scooter. I'm seeing more and more videos like that too. But um, I think it's going to be interesting with New York. I think now within the context of the UL certifications and stuff like that, we'll see how that impacts. But
Mm.
I think scooters have always been very popular in New York. And actually, I think the most popular thing you see in New York is um, those like bikes that people convert into electric bikes by like just slapping a battery on, which is I think this looks really sketchy. Um, but yeah, no, definitely starting to see just more generally a lot more ways that people are looking to traverse the city or get around in the city that does not include a car.
Yeah.
I think more and more cities, especially I think like more cosmopolitan cities, starting to look at cars as a problem within the city center. Traffic, lack of
Yeah.
parking, probably like accidents with pedestrians and cyclists and stuff like that. They're just like not really, I don't think in many city planners sort of like long-term vision. At least it wouldn't be in mine if I was a city planner. And so I think, cities are starting to look at ways to incentivize and motivate people um, to like, move around and commute and, go do their grocery shopping or whatever, without using a car. Now, I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's some cities in the U.S. that's not necessarily the case because in the U.S. a lot of cities are really built for cars, but in the New Yorks of the world, that's not necessarily the case, especially like parts of Manhattan and Brooklyn.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's part of a bigger trend too, where cities are, they went through this boom period where all they were building was roads, parking. And then we kind of reached the breaking point, right? And recently I've been noticing the opposite trend where they're actually taking roads and they're converting them into larger pedestrian areas, adding bike lanes. And all of a sudden the space that's restricted for driving is shrinking. So either it becomes a one-way street or parking disappears. And it's happening very slowly, at least in Montreal. But I'm definitely starting to notice that some neighborhoods are honestly starting to look pretty lovely now that there are fewer
Yeah.
cars around, right? More trees, more greenery, more walking areas. I'm curious to see if the US follows in a similar direction.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think, it really, really depends. I think the U.S. cities tend to be much more densely, or much more spread out
Yeah.
than in Montreal. Even Toronto and Vancouver are different. Um, and then yeah, I mean, anywhere else around the world that I've been, I think little lagging still, maybe outside of Europe. Cars are still so important.
Mhm.
But I think over time, a lot of the shifts we're seeing in cities like Montreal are going to and Paris are going
Yeah.
to start trickling down or trickling their way through the rest of the world.
And do you think that following the pandemic, there's been a permanent shift towards people using bikes and scooters and alternative modes of transportation and ditching their cars?
Yeah, probably. I imagine, I don't own a car. I would imagine having a car during the pandemic would just be a very expensive paperweight, you know? You're paying for parking, you're not really using it. Your insurance is still, you're still on the
Yeah.
hook for your insurance payments. You're still on the hook for if you're leasing it or any like financing that you're doing on the car,
Yeah.
and you just weren't using it. So I could see why a lot of people probably look to or would have thought about ditching their car. And then when you ditch your car, if you live in the city, you still need a way to get around. So looking at alternative options, um, very important too. So I think
So that's actually
scooters have been a very viable option for a lot of people.
yeah, sorry, I think there's a bit of a delay between us. But I think that's actually a really, really good segue. So one of the stats that we talk about a lot, at least in the marketing team, is the annual cost of ownership when it comes to cars. And that number has been pegged by various sources at anywhere between $2,500 to upwards of $4,000 even. And so we're of course looking at gas prices here, which are probably the biggest variable, right? Because the
Mhm.
prices tend to go up and down pretty in pretty volatile ways. But then there's also the cost of registering your car, any taxes you pay on it, any fees, like you mentioned, that are related to financing and leasing the car, and then lastly, of course, insurance. So can you tell me, just at a high level, if you bundle these costs, and let's call it $2,500 a year, right? How does that compare to owning a scooter over the period of a year?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to look at, or just from an outright cost perspective, you're to buy two scooters for just that yearly price, and then own them for forever. I think it'd be interesting to look at from and I've seen people do this on Reddit within the various communities. I'm just not remembering any of the numbers, but if you looked at your like electricity bills and tried to look at, well, how much does it cost to charge my scooter, and add that into the price, I would imagine that it's nowhere near that. I probably think that the price of the scooter plus anything that you're paying to charge the scooter and kind of use the scooter over time, would be probably get like 3 years out of the scooter if you were to put $2,500 instead of the 1 year you're getting out of the car.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. So kind of a 3-to-1 ratio you're saying for that $2,500, right?
Yeah, I think if I was gonna, just off the cuff, but something like that probably makes sense to me, if not
Well,
more. But yeah,
and we're probably talking about a pretty decent scooter as well. We're not talking about an entry level, Segway or something. We're talking about something a little bit
yeah,
more. Fair. Okay.
yeah. Like I would say, like a city.
Yeah. The finest commuter scooter ever built, as I'm
Yeah,
told.
the 23 is it's been great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds like you've grown more fond of it following the evolution from 2022 to
yeah,
2023.
yeah. The 22 was a little rough. The 23 is off to an amazing start, which is really good to see.
Good, good. Okay, and so I mean, another topic we just need to quickly address before we're able to move on is what about ownership versus sharing scooters, right? So obviously, there are many different ways to use an electric scooter. Some of them require you to pay by the minute or pay by the kilometer. Others, like us, we simply just sell it outright. Can you just give us a high level picture of what are some of the advantages of owning an Apollo scooter versus using the ride sharing models?
Yeah. I'll speak from like personal experience. I remember the first time I ever used a scooter was I was in Miami. I was living in Miami for a few months, 6 months, I think it was, and it was like right in the heyday of Bird, when Bird was first coming onto the scene, and they had like a really you had to like charge $10 minimum on your bird
Yeah.
account, and you would use it up. And if you didn't have like a minimum balance, you couldn't start a ride, and you had to like recharge some more. And it just like was a really weird way of just like losing a few dollars. It felt like losing a few dollars every single time, and actually like ended up being relatively expensive,
Mm.
with the way that their pricing model worked. I think the share model is a really interesting model, for a consumer. It's great. You hop on something, you ride it, you leave it somewhere, and you kind of like do what you need to do, and um, is very convenient. Obviously, you think you pay a little bit more per kilometer than you would if you owned the vehicle yourself, and there are the issues that come with, is it being well maintained? Are you getting like a tip top scooter? It's kind of like, I don't know, use Bixie at all, which is the bike sharing service in Montreal, but you've got like a 40 or 30 to 40% chance that your seat is just going to like continue to drop on you because it's not staying in place, or your brakes are not going to work that well, and that kind of sucks, and you don't really know about that until you've
Yeah.
already committed to the ride. So it comes with that side of thing. But I think obviously whenever you own something, you're taking a level of care. There's a level of care that comes with that. You're operating a vehicle, I think, in its the safest way that you could be operating a vehicle like that versus a share. You never know what someone else has done with it before. Um, and I think what's even better is, when you start talking about specifically Apollo, the level of personalization and customization that you can put into the riding experience. And I think, we've talked about the riding experience being a really important factor for us at
Yeah.
Apollo in the past. I think that, those are some of the key differences between the sharing and, personal ownership. But I think both models can exist. I think with sharing from a company perspective, the people, the service provider, it's clear that the unit economics are really difficult to get to work, and I don't expect that sharing is going to be something that exists forever, at least not in its the way that it's currently set up.
Mhm.
I think, these companies are just going to continue to lose money forever. Um, but yeah, so I personally see some in between approach being the one that makes the most sense. Something that gives you access to a vehicle that you want, um, without the massive well, maybe not massive, but the significant upfront
Yeah.
cost that might come with that. $1,000 is not super super cheap, for
Mhm.
like a pretty good commuter scooter. So something in between there that makes it affordable but still gives you access to your own vehicle, I think, is going to be the model that reigns supreme at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I think maybe one more point to add there is this often overlooked idea of availability, right? Bixie's all a wonderful experience when you're not necessarily in a rush or trying to get somewhere on time, but when you are in a pinch and you realize that there are actually no bikes around you, right? Then there's that panic that kicks in, and all of a sudden you are starting to look at where's the nearest bike station, and if you're going to have to run 1.5 kilometers to get there, and your plans basically just go up in the air. So
Yeah.
uh, the advantage of having a scooter that you own is obviously that you don't never really have to worry about that specifically. But so let's turn our attention for a minute to this idea of maintenance, right? Because okay, maybe with scooter sharing, you don't really have to think about maintenance too much. Granted, you are likely getting a subpar hardware experience when using the product. On the flip side, when you're owning a scooter, that responsibility to take care of the product is on you, the rider, the owner. So can you just walk me through some of the typical maintenance costs associated with Apollo scooters?
Yeah, sure. I think, the by far the most common replacement we see is the tire inner tube replacement. When you get a flat, I think that's probably the most annoying one. Um, that is, probably going to run you, depending on where you're getting your tubes, of $15-$20, plus the time to take
Mhm.
to swap them out. I think that is probably 80% of repairs are falling into that category, which has been annoying. Which is why we've moved away, or moving away from tube tires towards self healing tires to eliminate the servicing there. And while we're moving towards having assemblies to make that downtime, when you are dealing with a servicing issue, um, just much faster. So you can get back up and riding as quickly as you can. But yeah, I think servicing is still, when you think about electric scooters, still something that hasn't really been figured out that well. I think if you think about bikes as an analog, bikes, you've got your tune-up costs, probably like depending on what city you live in, $100 to $250 probably a season to get it tuned up. Electric scooters, you're probably looking at a similar cost, but I think what's missing there is the infrastructure. Um, and right now, I think a lot of consumers are left holding the bag with having to ship a product or their scooter to the place that they purchased it from to get it serviced and then have it shipped back. And then you've got the shipping costs, you've got the time that takes for people to do that. Even if it's under warranty, you're still paying. Whereas I think once the market formalizes a little bit, I think those costs go down. So I still think that servicing costs right now are a little high, from a scooter like perspective if something does go wrong, which is why I think obviously the quality control and the way that the scooter is designed, and tested is so important. But I think that's something that as an industry will fix itself in the very short term future as more and more people start riding scooters. I think there'll be more and more demand for people to come in and open those shops and start thinking about, hey, we should be servicing scooters as well, so that we can make some more money and grow our own businesses.
Yeah.
I think that's starting to happen today, so I expect those costs to go down.
And would you say that Apollo is taking the more unpopular path, which is to try and reduce maintenance needs as much as possible through the introduction of things like self-healing tires, like you mentioned, the regen brake, drum brakes, stuff like that, or should we perhaps have focused on really establishing a robust servicing network instead? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd be curious. I think, what's interesting is that I think even 2 years ago, you look at a scooter and it just didn't have any of those things. It was just plastic
Mhm.
everywhere. The idea was that how do we make these as cheap as possible so that we actually don't even need to fix them? If something goes wrong, we just throw it out, dump it somewhere, and then send the customer a new one or have someone purchase something new. And I think that was really the model up until, you know, I think Apollo stepped in and started putting some pressure on these other manufacturers with some of the changes that we were making that were primarily safety related, but also just
Mhm.
like focused on that experience and putting in like that baseline level of experience that is really important with like self-healing tires and stuff. And I think it was just a natural progression for us to continue to do that. I think what probably should have happened is we should have done it in the reverse order. We should have probably focused a little bit more from a servicing perspective. If I was to go back, that's what I would do. Um, but I think we're a tiny team, and there are other priorities. So I think um, what we're doing today is looking at, well, how do we make serviceability as easy as possible
Yeah.
because that network doesn't exist, while also looking to build that network still. I think we're operating as a at a size now from our company, the number of people we have and the resources we can dedicate, to do both of those things at the same time. So our focus is probably still, I think, on how do we make it so that the customer has all the tools they need to service their own scooters. I think that's the ideal situation, is that, the more aware someone is on how to service their scooter, the more educated, that, they are when it comes to this product, the safer they are going to be while operating and riding the product, the more likely they're going to be to identify if something might be wrong and not use the product, or, like fix it before,
Mhm.
riding it. Um, and the faster they'll be able to resolve any issues that they have on their own without having to, like go to a shop, wait for the part to come in, send it, all that kind of stuff that takes a really long time. And then what we're doing on our side is making the scooters better, just
Right.
from the parts that we pick, the way that they're assembled, the way that they're tested, and the way that they're checked before being boxed and shipped out to the customer, to make sure that we're not introducing anything into the market that would break down. Obviously our warranty is there for a reason, and QC Plus is there for a reason as well, and we stand by those programs, and they exist to make that experience better when the cases where those processes fail, or something slips through when it shouldn't. Um, but yeah, I think the focus really is on um, empowering our customers to service their own scooters, and
Mhm.
giving them all the tools that they need to do that. Repair videos, help desk articles, all that kind of stuff. I think
Right.
we're definitely leaders in that category by a mile, like by many miles, over our competitors.
I mean, it's a complicated question, right? Like, how do you make a product last? And I think a lot of people would just default to talking about product quality and, like you said, design, testing, all that. And I mean, we made a lot of these decisions a while ago. Like, we were one of the first companies that started using 21700 cells, right? We're one of the first scooter companies to get UL certified. We're basically leading the way in many of the kind of design level decisions there to improve product reliability and quality. But to your point, even if you buy a Mercedes, you're still going to have to maintain that car, right? It's probably going to be
Right.
slightly less frequently, or maybe in different intervals or whatever, but it's still going to require some maintenance, right? That's just kind of the nature of the
Mhm.
product. And I think, to your point, our customers or scooter riders more broadly don't quite have that mentality yet. They do expect it to last forever with very little time spent and money spent on maintaining the product. So is
Yeah.
there an angle where we leverage our app infrastructure as well to either build in some reminders or maybe make it easier for people to follow instructions and book an appointment? Like how are you
Mhm.
thinking about the app in this maintenance equation?
Yeah, totally. I think, it's important to, and I think the problem that scooters or, scooter ownership has, any of those problems have been solved by bicycle ownership already. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, you need to be doing seasonal maintenance. There are things that you should be checking every so often. And you should be, reminded to do those things. And even just as something as like, that service required icon on your car,
Mhm.
like HUD or whatever. Um, these problems, like the reason those things exist is because it's important that these vehicles are maintained, and that the recommendations that we as the manufacturer are giving to our customers are followed. And then I think the question is, it's on us as a company to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to remind and inform people of what they should be doing with their scooters. So you can't expect the customer to, maybe it's the first scooter they ever owned, to like know everything right off the bat. And they depend on us to provide that information. So we do that in a lot of ways. And it's something that has been a huge focus for us this year. With our preventative maintenance guides, we've got, checks. We've talked about this so many times. Every ride, what you should be checking, every 5, 50, 100,000 kilometers, what you should be doing. We have our maintenance guides at our servicing shops right now, only at our own, but very soon at our third party shops as well. So that's that tune up, where you have your scooter has been kind of in the garage for the
Yeah.
winter and you're going into the riding season, like bring it into one of the shops, a local servicing shop, and do your tune up and make sure that everything is operating the way that it should. You save so much money by doing that because you've fixed an issue before it's become something serious.
Yeah, totally.
And then when you start looking at the app, for sure, I think that's when you start getting into, okay, well, these things that we have currently exist on paper in the manual. I don't know what percentage of customers open our manual. I'm a manual guy. When I get a product, the first thing I do is I pop the manual open, I start flipping through it. But I know a lot of people are not like that. So I imagine that, there's a reason, like the app that we have is such an important part and an increasingly important part of the riding journey. So doing things like notifying customers of the checks that they should be doing when they hit certain kilometer, like when they've surpassed a certain kilometer threshold. So every 500 kilometers, hitting someone with a push notification, or having an activity log somewhere in the app that says like, hey, service due, and these are the
Yeah.
types of things that you should be doing, and then facilitating the booking process. So, they can click a button and make an appointment right away at their local servicing shop. That shop knows that they're coming in that day and knows what service is going to be required. They can come in, turn that around right away, and then you ride back out again. And just trying to make that experience as seamless as possible, I think, is what's going to get people to start thinking about preventative maintenance. I think a bit more, as much as we can facilitate the process. I think that's where you're going to see more and more people participate in that, and I think that's only ever going to be a good thing,
Mhm.
for not just our customers, but any scooter rider out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you kind of mentioned the idea of driving a car and seeing the service icon pop up. I think a lot of the reactions there are, okay, you know what, perfectly normal. The expectation is set that I will need to bring it in. Let me just take care of this car. But whenever a scooter rider tends to get a notification, reminding them to go service this thing, there tends to be a negative connotation with that, right? Like, why is this product not
Right.
lasting this long? Why do I have to pay extra? Why do I have to do X, Y, and Z? And I think a lot of that, to your point, is just to do with the fact that people don't have that expectation. So
Yeah.
how do you think we set that expectation moving forward as an industry?
Yeah, I mean, first things first is I think, if you ask someone, I think if you asked 100 people, how long should your scooter be lasting for? You'd get a bunch of different responses. I don't think you think some people would be like, like a year, some people would be like 2, 3, some people will tell you my scooter should last 10 years. I don't think any scooter out there built today is ever going to last more than like 3 years without something probably serious happening and something breaking that it shouldn't. And the reason for that is because there are no industry standards in place, right? Like it's not like it's still such a new industry, even from a manufacturing perspective, that
Yeah.
no one really knows what they should be building towards and how they should be like how many cycles they should be testing for, before like something cracks or breaks.
10,000 kilometers, perhaps.
Exactly how many kilometers, right? So we've set our own standard there with 10,000 kilometers. That's what we're testing every one of our components for. Um, and we've backed that up with the frame warranty for 10,000 kilometers for now. And I think the idea is that as we continue to test and improve the rest of the components, that one day the entire scooter is going to be
Yeah.
under warranty for 10,000 kilometers. So that's what we're doing on our ends, and I think
Mhm.
the rest of the industry needs to do that too. But you have these really, and I think also it's really important to differentiate. Like scooters are not a catch-all. Like your $300 scooter from Amazon or from Alibaba is not built the same way and is not the same type of product as an Apollo Pro or an Apollo City dual motor. Like those are just built completely different. You know what I mean? They're just a completely different class of vehicles. I think you don't have that with cars because you have those standards, right?
Mhm.
I think one day potentially regulators come in and say, well, scooters need to be built this way and they need to meet these certain standards. And we're seeing that with the UL certification. I think we'll continue to see that. And I think, there's a real potential that those 300 scooters no longer exist and just completely get wiped off the market. And then there is your lowest scooter is going to be $1,000.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because the investment required to make sure that you're using the right components. And again, I think, that's why I like the categories and the range of the price range that we play, or at least we compete in, because it makes sure that we're not cutting things that we shouldn't be cutting,
Right.
like some of our competitors are. So, yeah,
I mean, that's like the eternal question, Do we just do what people want us to do, which is make a $500 scooter with a big battery using the cheapest cells, dual motor, but using the cheapest motors, that weighs something ridiculously light, using the cheapest quality of aluminum, and too little of it, and
yeah,
just put it out there. I mean, that's obviously just a recipe for disaster, right? So,
yeah,
like I think a lot of people when they come to Apollo, they see the premium price point. They see that we are able to back it with not just certifications, but also our warranty, but also the servicing. And hopefully they understand that there's a lot of thought that's gone into making the scooter last for 10,000 kilometers.
yeah,
So,
totally. I think specifically with the Pro, it was really interesting to see a lot of people are like, this is overpriced for what you're getting from a
Mhm.
spec perspective. And it's interesting that people are still so caught up on the spec. I think the spec is important, obviously, but I think the build quality is the most important thing that you should ever be considering when purchasing a
Yeah.
scooter. Because yeah, maybe it can go like 150 kilometers an hour, or maybe you've got a 60-volt battery or 72-volt battery in there. Maybe you're getting 200 miles of range, but if that
Where
thing
do you get
breaks
the
in
parts from?
half
Right. Yeah.
while you're riding it, like
Yeah.
what are you doing with all those specs? Nothing, right?
Because people are looking at it as like, here's the sticker price, here's what I'm getting for it today, right? But nobody
Yeah.
nobody looks at it from the point of view of like, I'm going to own this thing for, let's say, three years. What kind of parts do I need to buy over the course of 3 years? How many
Hmm.
service issues am I going to have? How much am I going to spend on shipping this thing, right? Like nobody does like a lifespan evaluation of the expenses associated with ownership. And I
Hmm.
think that's sort of what we're trying to say. Well, hold on, when you buy an Apollo, you actually save on all these things. Maybe it's not an
Right.
upfront kind of cash off type of deal, but over the course of 3 years, you definitely outlay far less than you would owning a, I don't know, a Cabo or something.
Yeah,
So
totally. Agree.
yeah, so where I was gonna go with this next is really trying to understand this notion of depreciation, right? So when we're talking about cars, when we're talking about value, when we're talking about kind of cost of ownership, depreciation is one of the bigger contributors to that. How would you look at depreciation in scooters?
In what context? What do you mean?
How much is an Apollo worth at the end of 2 3 years when, let's say, you've kind of gotten most of its use out of it?
So we've tried to model this a little bit. I guess maybe I'll drop a little spoiler here. We've been very much thinking about building a bit of an upgrade program. So after your scooter has, after you've ridden your scooter or used your scooter for a certain amount, you could trade it in um, for a different model,
Mhm.
and get a trade-in value that you can then use later. And as part of that, we even started thinking about, that question of, okay, what's the scooter worth after X amount of kilometers ridden on it, and how do you add a value onto that? I think there's a lot of different ways you can think about depreciation. I'm not strong from a financial perspective. I'm sure some people watching this are probably going to be coming up with much better ways to do this. But if you look at just like a flat depreciation model, I think, I don't know, let's say a city, let's say, I don't know, a Phantom 23, was it MSRP 23.99, 21.99? We've been discounting a little bit this year, so somewhere around there. Probably, like once you've passed like 4,000, 5,000 kilometers, you're probably looking at almost like a bit more than 50% of the value of that scooter has gone.
After
If you were
5,000.
to use like if you were to use like a flat sort of depreciation model, but I think, a lot of questions still about what the best way to handle depreciation with a scooter. So I don't know if I really answered your question that well, but that's kind of how we're approaching it today.
I mean, I mean, of course, I understand this is just an exercise to understand sort of what are the parameters and how do we want to model it. But if we take what you just said, which is taking half of the MSRP of the Phantom, which is what 1150, and dividing it by 5,000 kilometers, we're looking at 23 cents per kilometer, which is pretty phenomenal in terms of depreciation value, right?
Mhm.
Like that's all things considered, the cost, the utilization of the device is nothing. I mean, how else can you travel a kilometer for 23 cents? Walking, I suppose, But even then,
Right.
if you want to get all kind of creative, you're probably spending money on food that is generating the calories that go into your body and all that, right? So is it
Yeah,
really
sure.
23 cents? Or maybe it's less more. I don't know. But the point is 23 cents with virtually no gas costs. We looked at
Right.
the annual cost of charging, by the way, and we estimated it to be between $3 and $4 USD per year for a scooter.
Oh,
Um,
really?
so
That's
really
something.
extremely affordable too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just pretend that it doesn't really exist because it's so
Right.
negligible. Minimal maintenance costs. We're looking at just upwards of 20 cents per kilometer.
Mhm.
How else can you travel that cheaply? Public transit, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a public transport or even maybe like a mechanical bike. If you're cycling, that's probably
Yeah.
another way that you could do it. Although, road bikes can be, I guess they're like equally expensive. I would say maybe the bike is probably the winner here in the category. But again, you're cycling. You're not sitting
Yeah.
on something, and you're not like using a magic carpet, to ride around the city. So the bike as well being a great vehicle. I love biking, and I love bicycles generally. They have
Yeah.
their downsides. You want to take your bike to the office, you're gonna arrive all sweaty and gross, and no one's gonna want to sit next to you. Whereas a
Yeah.
scooter, you show up, you pull up in the office, and maybe your hair's a little messed up, like mine is today, just from riding with the wind out. But you roll up cool and collected. But yeah, no, it is an interesting point. I think it kind of just goes to show where just when it comes to just an efficiency, if you're looking at a dollar per kind of like utility value, a scooter is really really up there in terms of the types of ways to get around within the city, especially within that. What did we talk about? That 10-kilometer sort of like, or maybe less, but there's a few kilometers traveled. What is it? 80% of rides occur
Yeah.
within, this off the top of your head.
Yeah. Pretty much that 80% of rides occur within, I think it was less than 6 miles. Yeah.
Less than 6 miles, right? So if you're looking at it that way, the scooter reigns. The scooter is a pretty. There's a lot of value that you can get from a
Yeah.
scooter when you travel that way.
No, completely. And I think one more point worth adding there is I think we're making decisions that are ultimately also lending themselves to a reduction in investment in security equipment, right? Like I'm thinking about the Pro, for example, and the IoT and
Yeah,
the locking feature that we've developed. Of course, it doesn't replace a lock, but it definitely eliminates the need for an over-the-top ultra robust lock because you can just kill switch the scooter, and so what's the point of stealing it, right? So I think maybe we're not quite there yet, but I can see in the future us moving towards that, and ultimately just hopefully making rendering stealing Apollos useless, and so you don't even need a lock at that point, right?
Right.
And I think similar kind of thoughts surrounding safety. Where I know where you in particular are looking at different types of insurance products that maybe one that we could embed into the app as well, so that we
Yeah.
could look at potentially ways of reducing the expenses associated with insuring our vehicles, or potentially even preventing injuries from happening and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
really interesting, I think, conversations being had about future reductions in ownership costs as well.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, I guess just on the insurance point, I think, that's part of this process, right? I think costs are going to go down as this industry becomes a bit more formalized and as we just get better at, as it grows. And yeah, I think formalizing is just like the way to set it up, where it's just right now it's like regulatory gray zones. There's not really an ecosystem supporting scooter ownership outside of like Apollo. Really, if someone buys an Apollo scooter, they are very dependent on us to
Yeah,
service that scooter and support that scooter and do everything with it. Whereas if you buy like a bicycle, you've got access to literally like thousands of different people who can like help you with that, a different shop or a website or something like that. Whereas scooters is not really there yet.
yeah,
Um, a lot of the work that we're doing is putting in the groundwork to have a structure and to sort of think about, like this is what um, a scooter economy looks like. This is what a scooter ecosystem looks like in a city. These are the types of things that need to exist. You need to have a local servicing provider. You need to have access to insurance to protect the vehicle in case of an accident or crash, to protect yourself in case of an accident or crash, and to get some coverage. To protect against theft, to protect against like within the warranty period or a defect or anything that might happen. So those are all things that we're working on that no one else is really working on within scooters. So we really see ourselves as a leader in that. And I think par for the course for Apollo to be setting the tone to do all of that work. And then I think, I think once we do it, we'll start to see some of the other larger manufacturers step up and do that as well. And that's kind of how you get from, what scooter ownership is like today to scooter ownership of the future, which would look very much like owning a bicycle and just having access to all the resources that you need at
yeah.
the, really right away.
Yeah, absolutely. So, uh, to wrap this discussion up, I have a question that's going to put you on the spot just a little bit. But
Okay.
if you were to make a pitch to listeners on why Apollo scooters are one of
Uh-huh.
the most cost-effective ways of getting around, what would it be?
Yeah. So definitely on the spot. So why are Paul scooters the best way to get around?
Most cost-effective.
Most cost effective way to get around. Okay. So Apollo scooters are the most cost effective way to get around because from a utility perspective, a dollar investment that you're spending on a vehicle to get around compared to what it currently exists out there, I think you're getting the most value out of an electric scooter. I think specifically an Apollo electric scooter is a step above any other electric scooter because of all the work that we do from the manufacturing, the sourcing, manufacturing, testing, and support side to make sure that at any point in time you are 100% supported when it comes to operating your vehicle, and the added value that comes with the software offering that we have just takes it a step above anything that exists out there today. So I think if you're looking at investing and being part of an ecosystem, which I think you have to do no matter what kind of product you buy these days, the Apollo ecosystem is the one that's set up to be the most robust moving forward. I think that's why investing in Apollo scooters, Apollo scooter is the most cost-effective way to get around.
Beautiful. Well
Yeah.
done. I
What
mean,
about you?
in case you were interested, marketing director is an opening at Apollo right now, so we're
Oh, there
looking
you
to fill that role. No, well done,
go.
Nadeem. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to add on, to the subject of affordability, getting around on scooters, why Apollo might be the best option for people looking to ditch their car and save a few bucks along the way?
No, I think we covered it. I think what's going to be interesting for Apollo, and one of the things I think we want to do a lot more is look at electric scooters are a great way to get around, but how do we accommodate people who are trying to do like get around in different ways. I think right now we are very much solving the like I'm an individual one person trying to get from point A to point B. And I don't have anything, I'm not carrying anything, maybe just a backpack or something. I think when you start looking at, okay, well, how are other ways that people are moving in the cities and how can Apollo solve those problems too? I think that's where we start getting into um, a lot more interesting challenges and different types of products. And I'm very excited for us to do that a little bit more, but I think we still have a long way to go with scooters. And I'm really looking forward to, the next 6 months. I think we have pretty big 6 months ahead of us in terms of formalizing the ecosystem, like I said. So keep your eyes out open for that.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, it is an exciting 6 months we had ahead of us. I think I wonder if you share the same perspective, but it feels like for the first time in our brief 5-year history, we are in a position where we have really stable products, really stable scooters that are performing above expectations from a reliability point of view. Our software is in a good position. It's stable. It's working as expected. And we're now really focusing on sort of getting our basics, our operations under control, so we can continue to deliver exceptional value to our customers before we really focus on hyper growth again. So it's that stability, I think, is what I'm trying to say, is a foreign feeling to us. And I'm excited to see what we can do with it.
Totally.
Cool. All right, Nadim. Thanks very much.
Thank you.